Hi guys, and welcome back. Today is the second part of this piece, so if you want to see where I do the line work and color comps for this, I'll have the video linked in the description. But moving on with this one, with finally painting it, I know I talked about this in the past, but it always feels good to put some time between working on the beginning of a piece and finishing it, for me at least, because my pace is usually much faster. I usually get things done within the first day or sometimes the second day of doing it. And I find that when I have more time to look at it and think about it, I feel, one, more connected with the piece, where it's more part of the way that I think, which is how I used to work a lot more. I would work on a piece a little bit every day, look at it, think about it, change little things, and eventually get to a point that I decided to stop. But my work process has changed significantly. So when I get a chance to be able to put things off like this and imagine it a little bit more, I do tend to enjoy working on it a little bit more. This one, I was honestly actually kind of nervous to finally start painting it. Some pieces I feel totally fine working onto the final, but for some reason this one I was just really scared of messing it up significantly. Mostly it came down to what I had plans for the skin, because I wanted it to have very saturated shadows. And the process that I have for watercolor, I'm beginning to realize, has some significant holes in it, ways that I could definitely improve. But I think the biggest thing is that I create shadows by layering it, which is a significant part of watercolors. But if I'm layering the skin tone on top of the shadow, or vice versa actually, then it's this very warm base with blue on top. The blue will be desaturated, period. So I was kind of getting in over my head, I guess, when I was trying to think through the process of making sure that the shadows were more saturated. And all in all, when I finally do get to it, which it's actually one of the last things I eventually address, but eventually I get it to be something that I'm happy with, but it certainly still shows me that I have a lot to learn as far as my technique for watercolor, which is actually really exciting. It's giving me some direction and things that I can specifically focus on and look up some actual classes and things that will address these issues that I have. And so that feels good, actually. It feels exciting to concretely know which direction I'm ready to start moving forward in. And I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone who commented on the last video where I asked for opinions on the color comps. That actually really helped. It helped because a lot of things that I saw it as a certain way, it was helpful to see what other people, how they perceived those color palettes, how it appeared to them. So there were a couple that were favorites of mine, but there were none that 100% I knew was the right color palette. And it seemed like pretty much all across people's comments, that was how it was. There were elements that people liked the most out of some of them, and then they wanted it combined with other elements, which is usually how I do my color comps anyways. I'll usually do several of them and then realize, okay, I like the background for this one and I like the hair color for this one, and whatever the case may be. So after I finished all of those color comps, I had a much better idea of the direction that I wanted to go by looking at all of them combined. It gave me a picture of what needed to happen. I did do several tests to make sure that the colors did go well together, the combinations that I ended up choosing. And I did skin tests to make sure that I was hopefully at least getting a grasp on how I was going to paint it. Because like I mentioned, I was feeling really daunted about actually starting to paint that and getting the effect that I wanted. So I just created several circles and I painted it in like the skin. I tried to figure out exactly what order I would paint it in, what paints I would use, and how I would layer it, blend it, and all that sort of stuff. And it did help give me more confidence when it came to the final result. There's still a lot that I just need to go and learn it. But practicing always helps, and getting that point where I can be like, okay, this is exactly my plan of attack, always helps when I'm feeling really nervous about a piece. Usually when I'm feeling nervous, it's because I am not as prepared as I know I could be. Maybe I don't know the color palette as concretely as I would like, or like this, I'm not exactly sure on the technique that I'm going to finish it off with, but when I practice and I do a few tests to make sure that I have a grasp on how I'm going to proceed, usually those fears tend to evaporate. I always have a few points where they go a little bit off from what I had planned, and that's just part of the process for me, at least. I usually do end up making a few mistakes or a few things that just turn out different, and that's okay for sure. But the more I can be prepared, the better I feel going into a piece. So I'm trying to make myself be more prepared. I'm trying to put in the steps and the time that I have done in the past, and I know greatly improves my pieces. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm making sure I'm prepared. And when I started painting the skin, you'll see that the little really small sections of hair and her eyebrows, I did not paint it. Now, I did that intentionally because my Payne's gray, which is usually the dark black color that I use, it actually bleeds quite a bit. It's very easily reactivated. And some of my paints aren't so much, and others like Payne's gray definitely are. And that is just a huge reminder. It's so important to get to know how your paints behave. Because like this, if I had gone straight in with painting in the eyebrows and I wasn't really thinking about how much it's going to smudge, it could have really bled into the skin once I painted right up against it. So yeah, it's just really helpful. There's actually another point that I made a mistake in because of the way that the paints behave for the background. When I was first painting that layer, I mixed a medley of blue paints, and I have this one, I'm not actually sure what it's called. It's like magnesium, something like that. Red shade. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. The point is that particular paint, it granulates quite a bit, and I actually don't like paints that granulate. And granulation, just a really quick side note, it's something that a watercolor paint does where it separates once it's on the paper. So you'll see certain parts of the pigment sink into the little valleys and cracks of the paint, and then other parts of the pigment will float to the top. And it's actually a very desirable trait for a lot of watercolorists, but I personally prefer them to be very homogeneous. I want them to be very controllable because of the process that I have. Anyways, so I included a little bit of this paint, not really thinking about it, but when it came time to actually painting this background, I wanted it to be a very smooth gradient, but that one paint, it started to break apart a little bit, and because I didn't mix up the puddle of blue paint that I had, it wasn't as evenly dispersed within the paint, so I actually ended up having this like mar in my wash. You can see it towards the beginning before I went back over it, but yeah, there was like that distinct mark inside of that background. And yeah, it was just a reminder. I need to make sure that I pay attention to how they behave and what's going to happen when I use them in certain situations. But yeah, I did actually end up getting a new black color. I think it's ivory black that I just got, that was the basis for her hair because it's a very neutral black, and I was excited about that. And that one actually doesn't bleed nearly as much as Payne's gray, so I probably would have been fine, but I would rather be safe than sorry as far as blending black into smudges around her face like that. So yeah, I do think that I'm starting to get a little bit smarter with details like this, where when I was first starting off, I think I would normally just go in and do all of the hair and not really think about the best way or the best plan of attack. I'm also starting to realize that some areas, like really small pieces of hair, if I paint over it with a certain color and I fill it in like that, so there's not actually a line, if I'm going to be painting over it with a much darker color, it's not really noticeable. It just glazes it slightly with a different color, very slightly, which is correctable. So I'm starting to realize that things like that, it creates a better piece for me to be able to just paint over small details like that than trying to paint around them, as long as I know what the final result is going to be and what I need to do to make it happen. So like that hair, for example, on her face, I end up painting over it while I'm painting her skin because I knew the outcome was going to be this black color and it was going to cover it up. And then I finally got to the eyes. Now this is one of the things that didn't really turn out the way that I had imagined. I am okay with the final result, but I know that it could have been a little bit different and maybe better. But this section, I just kept messing it up. I did end up deciding that I wanted to do dark eyes because I wanted the light and that ring inside of it to have a very strong contrast. That's the main point of contrast I wanted in this piece. So I did that, and then I had my Finetec gold palette. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I'll have it linked in the description. But I used the silver out of that for this. And luckily that stuff is actually very reactable with water. So once I put it down and I knew that that silver ring that I put in was not right, it didn't have the look that I wanted, I was able to wet it and then lift it off and then recover it with black, and it fixed that. But each time that I did that, it did start breaking that paper down just a little bit. So the quality of the paper under where her eyes actually are is a little bit rougher than some of the other areas where it's warped a little bit more. So her eyes almost have like this three-dimensional quality because it's popping off the page a little bit. But I was able to take it off. In fact, I had to do it a couple times where I did this ring and I was not happy with it. So I took it off and then tried again and I took it off. And I think it was finally like the third try where I gave her the black iris and I was like, okay, I need to step away from this. I need to just set it down and readdress this in the morning. And sometimes that's what I need, where I just keep messing something up. Sometimes I just need distance and I need time. Kind of like in video games. Maybe you've experienced this where you tried to play that level and you just can't beat it, and you step away from it, and when you come back, you figure it out and it all works. That's kind of the way it was for this, for the eyes. I just needed to sit it down, step away, and then come back with fresh eyes and then fix it. And in the end, I am happy with it. I think that it could have been closer to what I had envisioned, but well, maybe it couldn't have been, because I think what I had in my head was not very concrete. And I hadn't really put something down that showed exactly what I wanted to do with the eyes. So it was more like a really vague sketch in my head. And then when it came time to actually make it happen, I liked the result, but it wasn't quite as magical as what was in my head. But I hadn't actually made that happen, so I don't really know how I would have made this magical effect be more magical, if that makes sense. So basically, what I should have done is I should have done it one whole eye. I think I should have just painted an eye on a separate sheet of paper and really figured out this effect and this detail before I did it on the final one. And that is it for today's painting. I am excited to be done with this one and to work on... Damn it. And that is it for today's painting. I am excited to be done with this so I can work on a new one. And again, the theme for this one was the eclipse. So I'm excited to work on the next one eventually. Actually, I might do the next eclipse piece that I do that's inspired by my experience over time rather than trying to do it like I normally do for a video. And then I'll be able to show you guys something that I can spend more time on and be a little bit more proud on. But anyways, that is it for today. As usual, though, I do have the original painting available, so if you'd like to own her, I have a link in the description as well as in the end card. And I also have prints of this available as well, and that's the same link and everything. It'll just take you to my art shop. But I do post every Wednesdays and Saturdays, so I'll see you guys at my next one.